Welcome to our video tutorial on sketching the graphs of quadratic functions. So here we see a quadratic function. Right now, don't let that f of x faze you. We're just going to rewrite this. Rewrite it as y is equal to, now again we're going to group the variable items together, the things with the x's, and then we're going to leave the number off on the side. When we go to complete the square, which is essential, we factor out the number that's attached to the x squared from both of the variable terms. So here when we take 12 and divide by -2, it leaves us with a -6x. Keep that minus 24 off on the side, and now we actually complete the square. Half of -6 is a -3, so it'll be the quantity x minus 3 squared. When we were to expand this quantity, or FOIL it out, it would become a plus 9 because a -3 would be plus 9. But what we've really included in this expression, be careful, is a -18. So, to counter off the -18, we would have to add 18 over here, and that means we're going to have a -6 off on the side. So here is our completed the square form for the equation that we need to graph. Now we want to identify its vertex. That's like the center point. What value of x would we plug in to make the parentheses 0? That would be x equals 3. So that is the x-coordinate of the vertex of our parabola. The other way to look at it is simply change the sign on the number. The y-coordinate of the vertex just stays the same as what we see on the outside. Here that's a -6. Because of this negative in front of the quantity being squared, this graph is going to open down. And the 2 indicates that we're going to have to multiply by 2. Ordinarily, with a graph of y equals x squared, when we go left or right 1 from the center point, or vertex, we go up or down 1 squared, which is 1. And when we go left or right 2 from the center point, or the vertex, we go up or down 2 squared, which is 4. However, here we are multiplying by 2. So we are going to have to adapt accordingly. To fit this graph on the grid, I'm going to put the horizontal axis near the top because we're going to have to be in the negatives for the y values. And I'm going to put the vertical axis way over to the left because we're centering at x equals 3. Please make sure to label the axes. So we got the x-axis, we have the y-axis, and now we'll find our vertex at 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's our vertex. Now from that vertex we go left or right 1 and down 2 for the reasons we have already explained. And then from the vertex we go left or right 2 and down 8 for the reasons that we've already explained. Now it can be a little tricky here for me to draw this perfectly, but don't draw it as linear portions. Draw it as a smooth curve connecting these dots. Please put your arrows at the end, and it's going to be a U shape. Now in this case it's going to be a stretched out U shape, and that U shape is called a parabola. So again, when we're graphing, we first identify the vertex after we've completed the square. That tells us the starting point. And then in order to finish it off, we look at how much we're going to have to go up or down when we go to the left and right of the center point. So then what happens if we want to identify a graph? Well, that's our next problem. And you really want to think about it in a similar way. We're going to start by identifying where the vertex of our graph falls. In this case, it's centered at -2, and it's up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, on an assignment, on a quiz, on a test, you will see points clearly identified of where the graph crosses the grid. In this problem, we notice that we go down 3 from the center point to get to those first points. And if we count down all the way to where those next points are, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Ordinarily, it goes up and down 1, up and down 4. So we have a multiply by 3 happening in this problem. So note what we have. Here's our vertex, or the center point. It's multiplied by 3 and it's going down. So when we write out the rule for this graph, it's going to be y is equal to a negative 3 because it's multiplied by 3 and going down, times the quantity. Now we switch the sign on the x coordinate. So it'll be x plus 2, the quantity squared. And then the y center point just becomes the number off on the side. So here is an answer for the equation of our graph. This format is called the vertex form, or it could be called completed the square form for the graph. However, I might and will also ask for standard form. And standard form is when we FOIL that out. So x plus 2, the quantity squared, means we've got those multiplied together. Be careful. First thing that you want to do is FOIL out the x plus 2 times x plus 2. When we do the first terms, we get x squared. Then we get a 2x plus a 2x, which will be 4x. And 2 times 2 would be 4. Keep the 9 on the outside. Next up, what you have to do is distribute the negative 3 to everything in parentheses. So it will become a negative 3x squared minus 12x minus 12. But don't forget the plus 9. And when we combine like terms, it's going to be y equals negative 3x squared minus 12x, and then a negative 12 plus 9 would be a minus 3. This will be our final answer in standard form. And the reason it's called standard form is because we typically write the graphs as x squared, x, and a constant. So it's the standard way of doing things. One more extension of graphing. We looked at some problems like this in class, where we're trying to identify which graph has the smaller minimum and what that minimum would be. How do we know these have minimums? Well, the number attached to the x squared is positive. So when we graph each of these, it'll be a u opening upwards. And those u's opening upwards will have a smallest point, and that smallest point is called the minimum. Now, in order to complete this problem, we have to complete the square for both f and g. So first of all, we put the x's near each other and move the number to the side. We should all be pros on completing the square, hopefully. Factor out the number that's attached to the x squared and do that from both variable terms. Then we polish off completing the square. Half of 2 is 1. When we square 1, it's 1. 4 times 1 is really a plus 4, but then we have to subtract the 4 to counter it off. So here's f of x, and that's its form. It's going to have a minimum, and the vertex point for that minimum will be negative 1, comma, negative 1. OG, we'll do the same thing for g. So g of x is 2/3. Oh, we got a fraction popping up. Put that number off on the side. We need to factor out the 2/3. Now remember, we've done some problems like this. So you either think about dividing 8 by 2/3, and if we divide by a fraction, we multiply by its reciprocal. So I think we get 12. Or you're just trying to think about what would you have to put here so that when we multiply by 2/3, we get 8. Now we'll finish off completing the square. Half of 12 is 6. This is still g of x. Squaring 6 gets us 36. Be careful here though, because we have really included a positive 24. So we need to subtract the 24 to cancel it off. And when we do 10 minus 24, we get a minus 14. Here's the g of x equation. Its vertex is going to be at negative 6 comma negative 14. Again, we change the sign to get the x coordinate. The y coordinate stays the same. So up here, which has the smaller minimum? Well, f bottoms out at negative 1. G bottoms out at negative 14. So g of x has the smaller minimum, and that minimum value would be a negative 14. So there are a couple different spins we can put on this, but it all boils down to being able to complete the square and analyze the graphs correctly.